The Nomiki Show.
What did Texaco and Chevron, what was the situation that happened in Ecuador?
So in a nutshell, back in the 1960s, Texaco went into Ecuador and bought the rights to drill in a huge area of Amazon rainforest that was home to 5 indigenous peoples, about 1,500 square mile area just south of the Colombia border. Over the next 30 years, they drilled in a way that ended up deliberately and systematically dumping billions of gallons of cancer-causing toxic waste into the rainforest, onto indigenous ancestral lands, into the waterways that the local people relied on for their drinking water. Over time, the thousands of people became exposed multiple times daily to poison, to oil, to vapors, to toxins. The water they drank was poisoned. A lot of the food they ate was contaminated. The air they breathed was full of dioxins because they would flare the natural gas and create this black rain phenomenon. So, you go in a few short years to living a certain way for millennia, and then in 5 or 10 years, it's all gone and it's poisoned. And the indigenous groups were predictably decimated. Hundreds, if not thousands of people have died of cancer. And the worst is the problem is still there. I mean, Chevron ended up buying Texaco, so they own the problem now. They left Ecuador in 1992, but they left behind 1,000 open air waste pits gouged out of the jungle floor that still have pipes running from the sides into streams and rivers that people drink out of. So it's gotten worse since they left. And, I'm a lawyer and I work with a team of lawyers to help the affected communities. We ended up winning a huge judgment against them in Ecuador's courts, where, by the way, Chevron insisted the trial be held and where they had accepted jurisdiction. That happened in 2013. And rather than pay the judgment, Chevron threatened the indigenous peoples with a lifetime of litigation unless they basically quit the case. They came after me in a bogus racketeering case that they filed up here in New York before a federal judge who denied me a jury. And here I am locked up in my house, but the story of how I actually got here is quite interesting.
Yeah, let's get to that in a second. In terms of why Ecuador, how much were they ordered to pay?
They were ordered to pay originally almost $20 billion. It was cut in half in appeal. So the judgment now stands at $9.5 billion plus interest. So, depending on the interest, how it's calculated, where it's calculated, is $11 or $12 billion, which, by the way, is a fraction of the real cost of this damage. BP, by comparison, put up a $20 billion fund within 2 weeks of the Deepwater Horizon spill, which was an accident in the Gulf of Mexico. This was intentional. And BP has ended up paying $65-70 billion total for that accident. That was relatively, less impactful than what's happened down in Ecuador. Chevron hasn't paid the first dollar.
Well, is that actually a legal sort of strategy? And that if they were to pay, even though it was a ruling, if they were to pay these monies, it would prove that it was intentional, that they were aware that the harm was continuing. I know it was a ruling, but is it some sort of, I don't understand how you can have a ruling and then you still reface just by holding it up in courts. There's got to come a point where, what other courts are they going to if they wanted to do this in Ecuador?
Well, you'd be shocked.
I have no doubt.
Most people would be shocked to hear that corporations like Chevron just choose not to pay court judgments. What they do, they can't ignore it. But what they do is they pay their legal teams, and Chevron's used 60 law firms and 2,000 lawyers on this case, largely to target me. They just pay lawyers to tie up courts and say, we can't pay you. And they create these fake issues like I did something wrong and that needs to be litigated for 10 more years to determine whether I did something wrong to extort money out of them, which is their whole theory, which is completely false and has been rejected by 29 judges in Ecuador and Canada. So, they can just create issues. And then these judges in different countries, and they've spread this to, 4 or 5 countries now, trying to use their superior resources and their superior firepower to overwhelm the indigenous peoples who have virtually no money, thinking they'll just go away or thinking this will last so long that, eventually they'll win not on the merits, but because of their legal might. They've already lost on the merits. I want to emphasize that. Chevron lost this case. The communities in Ecuador won the case. I and other lawyers helped them win the case. And Chevron can't handle it. They cannot comply with this court judgment. And instead, they vowed never to pay. They're a fugitive from justice. And they've been attacking me up here in the United States kind of as a foil. They want to use me to distract attention from the environmental crimes that they committed in Ecuador. They're killing people as we speak.
So you win this case, and then what happens after that? They start to, they're ordered to pay the fines. How does this translate to the states? How did the fight?
Yeah, two things happened after we won the case. One is our team started to, since they wouldn't pay, we initiated what are called judgment enforcement actions, which is like if you win a judgment and the person doesn't pay, you can go try to seize their assets to force them to pay, which is what we did against Chevron's assets in various countries, including Canada, where we won a Supreme Court decision in our favor in 2015. So that was happening. While that was happening, Chevron got so angry at me because I was helping lead that, raising money for it, that they sued me and all 47 villagers from the rainforest who were named plaintiffs in the underlying case that we won back here in New York. And they steered it to this judge who's a former tobacco industry lawyer, who denied me a jury. They paid a witness $2 million to come in. They coached him for 53 days. And he came in and he testified that he saw me in a meeting in Ecuador where I approved the bribe of the trial judge in Ecuador. And it was just complete BS. There was no evidence it happened other than his words. He later admitted lying. Under oath, he later admitted lying repeatedly. But Judge Kaplan, who's this tobacco judge, used that testimony to find that I had bribed the trial judge in Ecuador, and it never happened. And it's been rejected by 29 other judges in Ecuador and Canada. But just this one judgment, Chevron has come back to him and tried to, pretty much destroy my life. They frozen my bank accounts. They disbarred me without a hearing.
How can they do that? What court is this in New York?
It's the U.S. federal court in Manhattan.
Okay. And how are they able to do that? Like freeze your bank accounts? I mean, you've had to surrender your...
But in a nutshell, they shouldn't be able to. So why were they able to? And the reason they were able to is because the whole thing is cooked. And I know that might sound odd to an American who believes we live in a country that is governed by the rule of law. And by the way, I believe we are governed generally by the rule of law. There is this little pocket here in New York with Judge Kaplan and Judge Preska, who are pretty much in bed with Chevron. They're like Chevron prosecutors, and they keep denying me a jury, and they let Chevron's law firm, Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher, put in false evidence. And then they use it to, take my money. The reason they took my money is because, and by the way, I don't have a lot of money, so they took
You mean freeze your accounts?
Freeze my account. They took the money out of them, put it in Chevron's. Chevron has all my money.
Chevron actually has, they freeze your accounts and then they take your money and reward it to Chevron like they're the victims in this situation?
Yeah, but that's the whole misdirection and BS of this whole thing. Chevron committed environmental crimes and is killing off indigenous groups in Ecuador. They refuse to pay, and they try to act like I and the Ecuadorian indigenous leaders somehow victimize them. So they're trying to turn the tables. It's a classic corporate defense strategy.
So beautiful. Poor Chevron.
But it would never work because people, it's a joke unless these federal judges facilitated it, and that's what's happening. And it's all hidden in like this technical jargon. There's these discovery disputes and Donziger didn't turn over documents and therefore he's the criminal. And, it's no different, honestly. I don't know if anyone has read the book Red Notice by William Broder, which is about his experience in Russia. He was a U.S. investor there, where Putin pretty much got jealous of how powerful he got. And they concocted a whole criminal case to drive him out of the country and try to jail him. But it was all fake. And what's happening to me, in my opinion, is the criminal contempt case against me that Judge Kaplan initiated is fake. I mean, it's all just cooked. I mean, basically, Kaplan took the charges to the U.S. attorney in Manhattan, the SDNY, and they rejected the case. That should have been the end of it.
Who was the U.S. attorney at the time? Was it Preet Bharara?
It was Jeffrey Berman. It was during the Trump administration. And you might remember Jeffrey Berman because he had the dispute, eventually had a dispute with Trump and left in the last year of the Trump administration. But in any event, they rejected the case appropriately, in my opinion. Kaplan, instead of letting it drop, appointed a private law firm, Seward and Kissel, to prosecute me in the name of the government. And he did not disclose that Seward and Kissel had Chevron as a client. And the person in that firm who he appointed to prosecute me, Rita Glavin, was a partner sharing in the revenue that the firm was making from Chevron and other oil and gas clients while she's locking me up in my own home on a misdemeanor criminal contempt charge.
Yeah.
Nobody in America other than me charged with a misdemeanor in the federal system has served even 1 day pretrial at home or jail. And I'm 630 days without trial on a misdemeanor that has a maximum sentence ever imposed in this district of 90 days of home confinement for someone convicted, but I haven't even had a trial.
Okay, so let's go back a second. So you have this Judge Kaplan who is allowed to, number one, appoint a private law firm. Is that normal? That seems...
No, it's extraordinarily rare and it's inappropriate in this situation, in my opinion. You know,
then they have a conflict of interest.
Circumstances where a judge can appoint a private prosecutor when, for whatever reason, there's a conflict or, the public prosecutor won't do something. But you can't appoint a conflicted private prosecutor, someone who works for Chevron, to attack the guy who won the biggest judgment against Chevron. So this is really deeply...
Who else is going to do it, Steven? Come on.
That's true.
Let's
I think
be real.
The prosecutor never would have locked me up, and they already looked at the case and refused to prosecute me.
Okay, so he appoints a private prosecutor. The prosecutor is conflicted out, but doesn't care, continues to do their job. I mean, you've been under house arrest over a misdemeanor for over 600 days. Your banks are frozen. You've had to surrender your passport. And what's next? I mean, is there the way that Yes.
So there's a trial scheduled for May 10th on these 6 counts that he charged me with. And I think I have total legal and factual defenses to all 6 counts. I think if there were a jury, I would be acquitted. I think the U.S. attorney refusing to take the case is pretty strong proof of that. He appointed...
To this day, under the Biden administration, still?
Well, I'm not sure I know what you mean. Let me just say...
So the U.S. attorney, let's just... sorry, you just said that the U.S.
attorney, there's no U.S. attorney in New York yet.
Right.
He or she has not yet to be
appointed. Because
appointed.
Berman has...
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Biden came in and he's still appointing his U.S. attorneys.
Exactly. Okay.
So, but this isn't, the U.S. attorney in New York has nothing to do now with this. This is all a private law firm prosecution. And we are asking the Department of Justice, Merrick Garland, to intervene and take this prosecution out of the hands of the private Chevron law firm and prosecute me directly. I mean, I'm probably the only lawyer in America begging the DOJ to prosecute me. I need a professional who can treat me in compliance with what the law requires, not someone who's acting in the private interests of Chevron, which is what Rita Glavin and Judge Kaplan are doing. And the other bizarre feature of this is Judge Kaplan assigned the case to a colleague who's a leader of the Federalist Society, to which Chevron is a major donor. And she's my judge, and she's the one who already decided I should be locked up for over 600 days without any evidence being presented in the trial. No trial has happened. And she has also denied me a jury, and she's going to be my sole fact finder. She's obviously prejudged the case. Look, I can't get a fair trial. That's the bottom line. This is not a trial as trials are commonly understood. The entire purpose of this trial, from my point of view, is to go lay a record so I can appeal the inevitable conviction, after which she will try to put me in jail. I'm convinced of this, to justify having kept me locked up for 600 days. The maximum sentence I can get is 6 months in jail. So this is a criminalization of advocacy. It's the criminalization of lawyering that challenges the fossil fuel industry, challenges a major polluter. It's the kind of work that I think is critically important to save our planet. In other words, we can't have the Chevrons running around the world destroying the Amazon and expect to deal with climate change. So I also see this as a major litmus test for the Biden administration in terms of, will they deal with the climate issue effectively? I mean, Merrick Garland needs to really seriously look at this and take it back, because you cannot have in America a corporate criminal prosecution. Never happened before. And once this happens, and by the way, trust me, this is a playbook of the fossil fuel industry. I mean, you're seeing this more and more with attacks on protesters at Standing Rock. There's been racketeering lawsuits against Greenpeace. And these are slap lawsuits. They're not designed to really resolve anything on the merits. They're designed to harass and silence critics.
SLAP meaning in reaction to a lawsuit that's been presented.
SLAP means, well, it's a kind of an academic term. SLAP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. They're basically illegal lawsuits designed to harass people. It's like Chevron has all this money, but we'll pay $10 million to lawyers to try to crush Donziger, and the gain from that is to silence him, not to get money from me because of anything I've done to them. So these are illegal lawsuits, but they're sort of hidden in traditional claims, tort claims, and legal claims, so they're sometimes hard to spot. But you're seeing them more and more, and they're often filed by, TransEnergy Partners filed a bunch of these against protesters at Standing Rock, the pipeline company. So you're seeing this more and more. They're copying what Chevron did to me, and it's a very dangerous threat to freedom of speech in our society, and just kind of the nature of our society. I mean, do we want a society where lawyers get locked up for winning environmental lawsuits? That's what's happened to me without a trial.
This is definitely part of their playbook. I mean, it's not just oil and gas. It's part of many corporations' playbooks. You see real estate developers doing it. You see politicians who speak up suddenly getting complaints filed at that. This is classic corporate warfare. As you mentioned, Putin, of course, used this strategy.
The Nomiki Show.